So it's much larger than it normally is. If I try going any bigger, I won't be able to get the coverage. That's the scale size. So it's probably 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 5 times bigger than normal. But definitely been focusing on the landscape. But this time I'm just going to do something very slightly different. I'm a big, as many of you know if you've been following my videos, big fan of abstract painting. I want to do a few of those. I already did 2 this morning. One of them I filmed The other one I didn't. But I'm needing kind of that abstract expression today. And this is going to be very different to my usual because I want to play with blends and being very soft and calm with the colour. I think I will stick to the pink for now. So I have the usual. I will just go get some paper towel. I have paper towel, 2 cups of water, which is standard. It's a dagger brush. The eradicator brush, I'm not planning to use this at all. I'm planning only to put paint down on paper. So as we can see, it is much bigger than our regular miniatures. And I'm aiming for something completely different this time. I am aiming for very calm, very gradual washes of paint. I want the colours to be very clean, very crisp. So to do that, I'm going to try not to cross-contaminate as much as possible. I'm going to be using PV19 as my base layer. Now part of that, I'll just rinse off the excess. I'm going to mix in some handmade silver. First wash, so I'm going to have to activate it. That wash, as you can see, is going to be quite light. There's a lot of water in that, but we do have a fairly big canvas to cover. So once that's all mixed together, I'll pick up some of the handmade silver. It's not a lot. I'm just going to mix that in. This will be barely seen. This is just the first wash. I'm going to tilt the page. I've just so I've got that. Hopefully this will translate to what I have in my head. The key with these granulations is regulating how much water is on the page as opposed to how much colour you put on the page. So already I can see that I've overshot some colour. I'm just going to leave a few seconds for that colour to kind of dry, or just to not necessarily dry, be absorbed into the paper. I can already see the paper starting to buckle ever so slightly. I'm going to pick up some more of that PV19. This is where I'm just rinsing off my brush. Idea, or the name of the game for me today, is subtlety, which is not my strong point. want these transitions to be so gradual. And every time I've run my brush down, I've just dabbed the excess on my paper towel. So I'm going to do another layer slightly under that first one. So trick 2, I've just wiped off all the excess. So we want the darkness to be gradual and not to bleed back into the damp paper above it. In some ways you work quickly, but in others you're very measured in your strokes. So I've wiped off a lot of the excess water of my brush. I'm just going along the edge, and because the brush is relatively dry, it is sucking the water and some of the colour from the very bottom, which is what I'm after. I'm going to go back in with a relatively dry brush, but with more pigment, and you can see it bleeds pretty much straight away. So we're getting to the water content in the paper, where it's still quite a lot of water inside the paper fibres, but we still want that natural gradient. So I've rinsed off my brush, and we're just trying to tease that pigment down to where it needs to go without lifting the pigment underneath. You can see it's gathered a little bit more on the left hand side than the right, so I'm just going to increase the pigment load on the right ever so slightly so it's slightly even. And each time I'm doing this, I'm taking off the excess moisture from my brush. Okay, I'm going to go in with something a little bit drastic now. I'm going to pick up more of the PV19. Make it very pronounced in these corners here. Wiping off the excess, and then I'm going to pick up some PV23. So it is quite a different pigment. Putting that in the corner. So making these wide sweeps from the top, just so I can blend. And I made a mistake there. I didn't rinse off the brush we've created. That's a shame. Hopefully that doesn't show up once it dries. One of the hardest things is to get that subtlety, because I'm working with damp paper, a damp brush, and not much pigment. That's what I'm after. Not successful. And now I'm overworking the paper. So this is quite cheap paper. It doesn't hold up to my regular scrubbing, just because it's not good quality. It's still 100% cotton, but it is a very inexpensive brand, which is fine for practice, which is what we're doing. Okay, going in with the last colour, which is indigo, right to deepen those corners. Okay, interesting experiment. Yeah, I'll go through with the paper towel, and I'm going to clean up some of those tape edges. only because I'm going to reuse the tape, and so I don't want to contaminate the colour afterwards. Normally I wouldn't do that. I said I wasn't going to use the eradicator brush while I'm not using it on the painting, but I do need to get rid of that spot there. So I've just dipped it in clean water, and I'm trying to scrub that colour out of the page. Again, because of the kind of paper this is, it's a cheaper variety. It doesn't hold well to scrubbing. Okay, automatically that pigment has found a natural path where the paper is wet, and so it is forming these kind of strands, which was not the goal, but now looking at it, I quite like them. So I'm going to accentuate probably the darkest parts of the piece. And because I know that that paper still has the water content in it, I'm hoping that that will translate into more of this effect. And it's because I also took the tape from underneath, so it's finding its path going upwards. So if I tilt it, it will go further if it's got the juice to go. So that's number one. So I'm going to take off the tape here. And again, a lot of people ask, what kind of tape do you use? In my experience, it's not necessarily the tape that makes the difference, it's definitely the paper. Does that peel quite nicely? Yay! So I'm going to reuse this tape down to the one below. It's the same dimensions, so it's about 5 times bigger than the regular miniature landscapes, and it's quite nice. You can see like the colours are quite similar, but this has just got so much more. This is definitely a landscape, but for me this is just depth. I really love that. That's why I like painting the abstracts. So let's pull that down. Okay, pulling this one across. I'm just going to reattach that tape to the next one, which is just underneath. I can usually get about 3 paintings out of the life of my tape. I think it's also important to reuse when you can. I really love that. I just think that's got a lot of depth for a very simple exercise. So I'm going to do something very, very similar underneath. So move that up so you can see. And this one, I'm going to change up the colour and the pink, and I'm going to go in with the green. So I'm going to use 2 pigments primarily. The first one will be PG36 and PY110, the mixture. It's a sap green, so I've already got some on my palette. if you're watching this, I'm assuming that you love to paint, or you just are relaxing. Tell me which one. Do you love to paint? I think it's important that we know it doesn't always have to turn out. Like I said, I've done 2 or 3 today, and they haven't all worked. I'm going to do something similar with this. Now I'm going to make the paper stand a little bit with my stamp. So I'm going to pop that stamp underneath so it's on an angle. So I've mixed up a very light colour of my PG36 and PY110. And I'm just going to use my dagger brush. Very light downward slope wash. Being careful with the pigment. Okay, so now I'm going in with that same pigment, which is PG36 and PY10. And because the paper is still very wet and it's in a downward motion, hopefully that extra pigment that I put on is going to flow down. And we want that graduation from that first colour to the second colour to be very, very subtle. Just rinsed off my brush. I'm going to pick up some clean water, dab it off a little bit, and I'm just going to do a downwards run, just like that, and then I'm wiping off the excess. In between each stroke, I'm wiping off the pigment and the water that's been picked up from the page. And you can see that that's blended that nicely. You can see there's beading at the bottom. I'm going to try and soak some of that up with the paper towel. You can see it's just getting absorbed into the paper towel. Because we have the paper raised, it's naturally going to fall and bead at the bottom, which is what we don't want. I'm going to go in and I'm going to pick up a different pigment now. This one is PBK31. So I'm already going subtle colour, but it is to that first 2 layers I used. And because we have the page kind of going down, I'm just going to try and encourage that to blend a little bit more by pushing it up slightly. And that's going to blend in. I don't want that beading yet because I want to control the colour that's at the bottom, so I'm just going to soak up some of that pigment. I'm going in with the PBK31. Okay. It's a lot less subtle, but we can see I'm going to take out that stamp underneath that was angling it for me, and we can see it's starting to bleed upwards into that picture. So we're getting those natural tree-like effects. What that is, powders basically finding a path in the wet paper because it wants to go somewhere. And what I've noticed since putting the page down is on the sides here there's darkness that has bled up on the sides here. I don't really want that, so I'm going to very carefully go in with my brush and try and pick that up. That's a dry brush, so I'm hopefully just removing that dark pigment. And hopefully I'm leaving behind that subtle I had before. I love that. I love that. I love that. I love that. That is beautiful. I'm going to darken up these corners again with that same PBK 31. The pigment number. I haven't been saying the brand on purpose so that you can go to any brand that you like and get the same pigment. Because all paint, no matter what paint it is made up of pigment powder. So basically powdered colour. That gives each of the paints its specific properties. That's lovely. That's very subtle and I like that. Number 2, done. Okay, so let's peel this away. Now when I put down my tape, I, on purpose, put it over the pencil sketched line. You can see it here, probably. Just fix that up. That's so once I'm done and the paint is dry, I can go over with an eraser and I can get rid of those guidelines. I was just very specific about the border lines that I wanted for these. So with this one, I'm going to soak up that paint on the tape. The reason for that is because I'm reusing the tape, and our next colour is not green, so I don't want to pick up any of this green pigment that has dried on the tape because I don't want it to contaminate the next picture. Now I can feel the tape has lost a lot of its tackiness. This is the third time that we're using it. So I'm just making sure that the tape is covering the guidelines that I've put in place so that when it comes to finishing off, I can erase those lines easily. This will be my third in essentially my signature colours, which is the pink, the green and the blue. I'll show you some examples, but I have one more square, so I'm going to throw it over to you. What colour should I put this final one in? What colour should I make it? And to give you an example of my work, so there's the pink. Got that there. This is the blue, so this is what we're going to do now. Let me find a green. Here we go. So this is the usual. Okay. So my colour is very predictable. It's usually a combination of these three colours. But I have one more to do. So you let me know what colour. I usually go for a sunset kind of vibe. Last night I painted something very different and I very much liked it. I went for a abstract moon glow effect. I really liked that one. And I have been experimenting with earth colours. I rarely paint with earth colours, so this was a new one for me. So let's get on to the blue. We'll do the same thing. We will raise the canvas just slightly. Make up quite a mix. So this one is indigo. So this is Winsor and Newton indigo. So their combination of indigo is PBK 6, PB19 and PB15. So I've tried many variations of indigo, and I always come back to with this brand because I like the way that they mix their pigments. It has a very specific colour and I like that. So I'm going to stick with that. So this pigment originally is a natural pigment made from plants, especially in Japan. But with most things these days, this is a synthetic created colour. Just wipe my brush off in between, soaking up excess. I'm going to hold this up and let it run the other way just ever so slightly, rinsing off my brush. I'm trying to now last very subtle layers in the corners here. And hope that it's got enough pigment to find and work its way up like it has with the others. So that worked out really well, exactly like the other three. So I'm just going to take this off and maybe we'll get one more painting out of it. Which is very cool. That's so cool. I like them. I like them. I like them a lot. So the last one, I never paint with these colours, so I'm going to try it. I'm going to do a yellow orange. And I say never. They're incorporated normally with my other ones, but they're just not the main show. Okay, last one. We're going for the earth. What does the earth look like? That's what the earth looks like. Because these colours are a lot less pigmented, or pigment isn't as staining, is probably a better way to describe it. I'm using a flat method here to try and get the pigments blended well. So now I'm going in with PR 101, which is probably known as, is it burnt sienna? Yes, it is. Okay, we can see that, like, you can definitely see the graduation from the burnt sienna. And I kind of want to soften that, so I'm just going over with a very slightly damp but clean brush and just trying to blend those two together in a way that's natural. So I'm going to go back in with the burnt sienna, make it a bit darker. So the brush is quite dry. And it's just the water that's already in the paper fibres that is blending it for me. Okay. Now to add that darkness, which we can't really get with earth colours, I'm just going to go in with the PBK 31, which is the same colour that I used on our green one. I find that this particular pigment works really well with the earth colours. So I'm going to go back in, darken those corners once again, this time with Payne's Grey, which has a little bit more black in it than the blue. When it's working with that PBK 31, it works quite well together. So that's it. Exactly what I felt like doing this afternoon, is just very simple, clean